Before we get into this, let me say something. If you're watching from Florida, especially the Keys, hit that subscribe button right now. What I'm about to tell you isn't folklore. It's not some campfire story. This is documented, witnessed, and buried so deep by the government that even mentioning it could end my career. So smash that like button if you want to hear the truth about why Hurricane Elena never really left. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because if you're in the Keys, you might have driven through this yourself without even knowing it. You might have felt that unnatural wind, seen rain falling from a clear sky, or noticed your radio going static at mile marker 47. There's a reason for that. My name is Sheriff Marcus Reeves, Monroe County, Florida, the Keys. I've been wearing this badge for 18 years and I thought I'd seen everything. Hurricane damage, drug runners, tourist stupidity, you name it. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for October 2023. For what I found at mile marker 47 on the overseas highway. For the storm that refused to die. Let me start with what everyone knows. Hurricane Elena made landfall on October 12, 2023. Category 3. Sustained winds of 120 miles per hour. She hit Islamorada at 3:17 a.m., exactly where Hurricane Irma had hit 6 years earlier. The National Hurricane Center predicted she'd weaken rapidly after landfall, dissipate within 18 hours. Standard pattern for October storms. Except Elena didn't dissipate. Not really. The weather station said she did. Satellite imagery showed her breaking apart, losing organization, fading into a tropical depression that drifted harmlessly into the Atlantic. The National Weather Service gave the all-clear at 9 p.m. on October 13th. Evacuation orders were lifted. People returned to their homes. But something was wrong. I felt it the moment I drove back into the Keys. The air was too heavy. The wind had a rhythm to it, a pulse that shouldn't exist in normal weather. And at mile marker 47, right where the old Islamorada ruins stood, the rain never stopped. I got the first call at 6 a.m. on October 14th, the morning after the official all clear. It was from Maria Santos, a local who ran a bait shop near Theater of the Sea. Sheriff, something's wrong with the weather at my shop. The hurricane's still here. Mrs. Santos, the storm passed. What you're experiencing is probably just residual rain bands. No, Sheriff, I've lived through 30 hurricanes. This isn't residual anything. The wind is still blowing at hurricane force. The rain is sideways. The storm surge is still pushing water into my shop. But when I drive 2 miles north, it's calm. Clear skies. This isn't normal. I told her I'd check it out, figuring it was just localized flooding or maybe some weird meteorological quirk. The Keys get strange weather all the time. But when I drove south from Key Largo toward Islamorada, I saw what she meant. At mile marker 50, the weather was perfect. Sunny, light breeze, typical post-hurricane clarity. But ahead, I could see a wall of darkness. Not a cloud line, not a squall. A solid wall of gray that stretched from the water to the sky, perfectly circular, maybe 5 miles in diameter. I radioed dispatch. "This is Sheriff Reeves. I'm approaching mile marker 47. Can you confirm current weather conditions in Islamorada?" "Sheriff, Weather Service shows clear skies, wind at 8 miles per hour, no precipitation." Then the Weather Service is wrong. I'm looking at what appears to be a Category 3 hurricane sitting stationary over Islamorada. Silence on the radio. Then, "Sheriff, repeat that?" "You heard me." There's a hurricane here. It never left. I stopped my vehicle at the edge of the weather wall. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. On my side of the line, calm and sunny. 10 feet ahead, chaos. Rain so thick you couldn't see through it. Wind bending palm trees horizontal. storm surge flooding the highway. I got out of my vehicle and walked toward the wall. As I reached the boundary, I felt the temperature drop 15 degrees. The wind hit me like a physical force, nearly knocking me over. Rain drenched me instantly, warm but violent, driven by winds that screamed with that distinctive hurricane howl. I took one step forward, fully entering the storm. The world changed. The light quality was wrong, tinted green like it gets before a tornado. The rain fell at impossible angles, sometimes going up instead of down. And the sound, God, the sound, it wasn't just wind. There were voices in it, hundreds of voices, screaming, crying, calling for help. I stumbled backward, out of the storm, and suddenly I was dry again. Completely dry. Like I'd never been wet. The boundary wasn't just meteorological. It was something else. Something that defied physics. My radio crackled. "Sheriff, we're getting multiple 911 calls from Islamorada. People trapped in the storm. They say it never ended." Over the next few hours, I coordinated what should have been impossible. We were running rescue operations for a hurricane that officially didn't exist. The National Weather Service insisted there was no storm. Satellite imagery showed clear skies, but boots on the ground. People were drowning in storm surge, trapped in buildings being torn apart by Category 3 winds. I called in the Coast Guard. They sent a helicopter. The pilot radioed back 10 minutes later, confusion in his voice. "Sheriff, we're hovering over Islamorada. Weather is clear. We don't see any storm activity." "You're telling me you don't see the rain? The wind?" "Negative, we see sun, calm water, maybe 10-knot breeze. But people on the ground were dying." We pulled 3 bodies from the storm surge that day. Drowned in a hurricane that didn't exist according to every weather instrument in the world. By evening, word had spread through the Keys. News crews tried to film the phenomenon, but their cameras showed nothing unusual. Clear weather. But when reporters walked into the affected zone, they experienced the full force of a hurricane. Some stayed out too long and had to be rescued. One cameraman was hospitalized with hypothermia. Despite the air temperature being 85 degrees, the state sent meteorologists. They set up instruments right at the boundary. On the clear side, their equipment read normal. But when they moved the instruments 10 feet into the storm zone, the readings went haywire. Barometric pressure that shouldn't be possible. Wind speeds that fluctuated between 0 and 120 miles per hour in seconds. And the temperature. It varied by 40 degrees within inches. Dr. Sarah Chen, a meteorologist from the University of Miami, was the first to say it out loud. "Sheriff Reeves, this isn't a weather phenomenon. This is something else. Meteorology can't explain what's happening here. This storm is behaving like it's alive, like it's conscious and choosing to stay in this exact location. Storms don't choose, Doctor." "No, they don't. But this one is." That night, I made the mistake of staying in the zone after dark. I needed to understand what was happening, needed to see if the storm changed with nightfall. I parked at mile marker 47, right in the center of the permanent hurricane, and waited. The storm raged around my vehicle. Wind rocked it violently. Rain hammered the roof with force that should have shattered the windshield. But I noticed something. The pattern was too regular. The wind gusts came in waves, timed perfectly, like breathing. Inhale, exhale. The hurricane was breathing. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the time Elena had made landfall, everything stopped. Complete silence. The wind died. The rain ceased mid-fall, droplets hanging suspended in the air. And in that silence I heard them clearly. The voices. "Help us. We're still here. Don't leave us in the storm." I grabbed my flashlight and got out of the vehicle. The suspended raindrops glowed in my beam, each one containing an image. Faces. Hundreds of faces pressed against the inside of each droplet like they were trapped in tiny prisons. I reached out to touch one. The moment my finger made contact, the droplet burst, and I saw a flash of memory that wasn't mine. A man in 1930s clothing holding onto a railroad track as wind tried to tear him away. Storm surge rising around him. Then nothing but water and darkness and the endless howling of wind. The vision lasted maybe 2 seconds. When I pulled back, all the suspended droplets fell at once, and the hurricane resumed with doubled intensity. I ran back to my vehicle, soaked and shaking. I knew then what this was. Or at least I thought I did. I'd heard the stories. Every Keys local knew about the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. Category 5. Strongest hurricane to ever hit the United States. It killed over 400 people, most of them World War I veterans who'd been sent to the Keys to build the overseas highway as part of a Depression-era work program. The government had sent those vets, men who'd survived the trenches of France, to die in a hurricane because someone miscalculated an evacuation. A train sent to rescue them arrived too late, was blown off the tracks. The men were left to face 185 miles per hour winds with nothing but flimsy work camps for shelter. They died screaming into a storm that buried them in sand and debris. Their bodies were found days later, some stripped naked by the wind, some driven through with planks of wood like spears, some never found at all. And 88 years later, something of that storm remained. Not the meteorological event, but the trauma, the death, the betrayal. All that suffering and terror had been absorbed by Hurricane Elena when she crossed the same path, and now she was stuck here, held in place by 400 souls who never got to leave the storm. I contacted Dr. Chen at 4 a.m. She answered despite the hour, and I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "Doctor, I need to ask you something. The Labor Day hurricane of 1935. It hit the same location, didn't it?" Silence. Then, "Yes." Mile marker 47 is approximately where the eye made landfall. Why? Because I think this storm is connected to that one. I think something from 1935 never left, and Elena tapped into it. Sheriff, that's not... I know how it sounds. But I saw them, Doctor. The faces in the rain. The voices in the wind. This isn't weather. It's a haunting. A massive, Category 3 haunting that's trapped 400 souls in an endless loop of dying in a hurricane. Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Sheriff, the government sent me here to debunk this, to find the scientific explanation and make it go away. But I've run every test I can think of. This storm shouldn't exist. It violates every law of thermodynamics. The energy required to maintain a hurricane in a fixed position for this long should have dissipated days ago. Unless what? Unless it's being powered by something other than atmospheric conditions. Sheriff, have you heard of residual energy in hauntings? The theory that traumatic events leave impressions on a location. You're saying an entire hurricane is a residual haunting. I'm saying I don't have any other explanation. And if I'm right, this storm will never dissipate naturally. It's going to stay here in this exact spot until whatever is keeping it alive is resolved. The next day, October 15th, the government arrived in force. FEMA, National Weather Service, Department of Homeland Security, even some 3-letter agencies I didn't recognize. They set up a perimeter around the storm zone, evacuated everyone within the 5-mile radius, and declared it a no-go area for civilians. I was escorted to a command center where I met Director James Walsh, a Department of Homeland Security official who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Sheriff Reeves, you're to cease all investigations into this phenomenon. It's a matter of national security now." National security? People died in there. More will die if we don't. We're aware of the casualties. But spreading panic about a supernatural hurricane helps no one. The official story is a localized atmospheric anomaly. NOAA is working on a solution. And the unofficial story? Walsh studied me. The unofficial story is that you're right. This is connected to the 1935 hurricane. We've known about residual phenomena in the Keys for decades. Minor things. Ghost sightings, phantom sounds. But nothing like this. Elena somehow amplified it, gave it physical form. Now we have 400 dead World War I veterans holding a Category 3 hurricane in place, and we have no idea how to make them let go. Have you tried talking to them? Talking to them? They're trying to communicate. The voices in the wind, the faces in the rain. They're reaching out. Maybe they need something. Maybe they're waiting for something. Walsh shook his head. Sheriff, we've tried everything. Prayers, exorcisms, scientists, psychics. Nothing works. This storm is here to stay unless we can figure out what they want. Over the next week, I became obsessed. I read everything I could find about the 1935 hurricane. Survivor accounts, government reports, newspaper articles. The story was worse than I'd known. The veterans had been sent to the Keys as a dumping ground. Shell-shocked, alcoholic, unemployed men that society didn't want to deal with. They were promised good work, decent pay, a chance to rebuild their lives. Instead, they got brutal labor in tropical heat, poverty wages, and camps that were little better than prisons. When the hurricane came, the government waited too long to evacuate. The rescue train arrived hours after it should have, and by then the storm surge had already washed out parts of the tracks. The engineer tried to push through anyway. The train derailed, and 400 men died in the most horrific ways imaginable. Ernest Hemingway, who lived in Key West at the time, wrote a scathing article about it. He blamed the government, the administration, the bureaucrats who'd treated these veterans as disposable. His words were suppressed, but he'd been right. These men had been murdered by negligence, by apathy, by a system that didn't care if they lived or died. And now they were trapped in that moment. Still dying, over and over, for 88 years. Still waiting for someone to care enough to save them. I realized what they wanted. Recognition. Justice. Someone to acknowledge what had been done to them. On October 22nd, 10 days after Elena made landfall, I drove to the storm wall. The government had it heavily restricted, but I still had my sheriff's credentials. I talked my way through the checkpoints and parked at the boundary. Dr. Chen met me there. "You're going in, aren't you? Someone has to. They're trying to communicate. Maybe if I go all the way in, into the eye, I can understand what they need." "Sheriff, no one who's gone into the eye has come out. We've sent in 3 teams. They vanished." "What do you mean vanished?" "I mean they're gone. Not dead, not injured, just gone. Like they stepped into 1935 and never came back." I looked at the wall of rain and wind. Then, maybe that's what the veterans want. To not be alone in there anymore, to have company in their eternal storm. That's insane. Maybe. But it's the only theory that makes sense. They were abandoned in 1935, left to die alone in a hurricane. Now they're recreating that experience and they want witnesses. They want someone to see what was done to them. Dr. Chen handed me a waterproof radio. "If you're determined to do this, at least take this. Record everything. If you don't come back, maybe your testimony will help us understand." I took the radio, checked my watch, 2:30 p.m., and walked into the storm. The transition was immediate and violent. Wind slammed into me from all directions at once. Rain came down so hard it felt like being beaten with fists. I couldn't see 3 feet in front of me. The world was gray and wet and screaming. But I pushed forward, using my vehicle's GPS to navigate toward the eye. According to the instruments, the eye was only half a mile from the boundary. But in the storm, it felt like miles. I passed debris that shouldn't exist. A 1935 Ford truck, rusted but intact. Railroad ties from the rescue train. And bodies. Not real bodies, but impressions of them. Silhouettes made of rain and wind that showed the positions the men had died in, clutching each other, trying to hold on to anything stable, mouths open in eternal screams. The voices grew louder as I approached the eye, not screaming anymore, but speaking, asking questions. Did anyone survive? Did they send help? Does anyone remember us? Why did they leave us here? I shouted back. I remember. The world remembers. You weren't forgotten. The wind paused for a moment. Just a moment. Then resumed with renewed fury, but now it was guiding me rather than fighting me, pushing me toward the eye. I broke through the eye wall and stumbled into calm. The eye of Hurricane Elena, or what remained of the 1935 hurricane I couldn't tell anymore, was about 200 yards across. Inside, it was eerily peaceful. No wind, no rain. Just overcast skies and silence, and standing around me, filling every inch of the eye, were the men. The 400 veterans of the 1935 Labor Day hurricane. They didn't look like ghosts, not really. They looked solid, real, wearing their 1930s work clothes covered in mud and blood and debris. They stared at me with hollow eyes. One stepped forward. He was young, maybe 25, with the haunted look of someone who'd seen too much. His name tag read Corporal Thomas Mitchell. "You came into the storm," he said, and his voice was both one voice and all 400 speaking at once. Everyone else who tried ran back. "But you came all the way in. Why?" "Because you deserve to be heard," I said. "What happened to you was wrong, criminal, and I think you're keeping this storm alive because you need someone to acknowledge that." Mitchell nodded slowly. "We died screaming for help that never came. We were heroes in France. Survived gas, survived shells, survived the trenches. And our government thanked us by sending us here to die in poverty and neglect. When the hurricane came, they had hours to evacuate us. They waited too long. They always wait too long for men like us." "I know," I said. "I've read the reports. Hemingway's article. The government investigations. You were betrayed. So you understand why we can't let the storm end. This is our testimony, our proof. As long as the hurricane exists, someone has to pay attention, has to remember what was done to us. But you're hurting people now. The storm killed 3 people last week. Innocent people." Mitchell's face darkened. "And how many of us died? 400 innocent men left to drown and be torn apart by wind? Where was the outrage? Where were the consequences? The administrator who delayed the evacuation got promoted. The railroad company that sent a train too late faced no charges. Everyone moved on and forgot. So now we make sure no one can forget. Keeping the storm alive won't bring justice." "No," Mitchell admitted, "but it keeps us from being alone. For 88 years, we've been trapped in the moment of our death. The terror, the pain, the betrayal. At least now, with the storm visible, with people forced to acknowledge us, we have company in our suffering." I understood then. This wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about the fundamental human need to not be forgotten, to have our suffering recognized. These men had died feeling worthless, disposable. and they'd spent nearly a century trapped in that death, unable to move on because no one had ever said the simple words they needed to hear. "You mattered," I said. "You fought for this country. You deserved better. What happened to you was wrong, and I see you. I acknowledge your deaths. I witness your suffering. And I promise, if you let me leave this storm, I will make sure the world knows what happened here. Not just the 1935 hurricane, but you, your names, your stories. All 400 of you will be remembered." The veterans looked at each other. Hundreds of silent conversations passed between them. Finally, Mitchell spoke. "We've heard promises before. We were promised good work. We were promised we'd be taken care of. We were promised rescue. Why should we believe you? Because I'm not promising to save you or change the past. I'm promising to bear witness, to carry your story forward. That's all I can offer. But it's real, and it's all I have." The sky above the eye began to shift, the overcast gray brightening slightly. Mitchell stepped closer. "If we let the storm end, we end. We'll finally move on, dissolve into whatever comes after. We're afraid of that. This storm is hell, but it's a hell we know. What comes after might be worse. Or it might be peace, rest, the end of suffering. Don't you deserve that after 88 years? Mitchell closed his eyes. "I'm tired, Sheriff." "We're all so tired. We've been dying for longer than we lived. Maybe it's time to finish dying." He raised his hand, and all 400 veterans did the same. They spoke in unison, their voices becoming one with the wind. "Remember us. Tell our story. Don't let us become a footnote in history. We were men. We mattered. We died badly. Remember." Then they were gone. Not fading, just gone. And the eye wall collapsed. The hurricane came down on me with full force, but only for a moment. I felt wind and rain and crushing pressure, and then suddenly I was standing on dry pavement in bright sunshine. The storm was gone, completely, as if it had never existed. My radio crackled. Dr. Chen's voice shocked. "Sheriff?" Sheriff Reeves. The storm just dissipated, instantly. One moment it was there, the next, gone. "Are you alive? Are you okay?" I looked around. Mile marker 47 was damaged but recovering. The sun was shining. A normal October day in the Keys. "I'm alive," I said, "and I have a story to tell." But as I walked back to my vehicle, I felt something in my pocket. I pulled out a weathered photograph I didn't remember having. It showed 400 men standing in front of a work camp, squinting in the sun. On the back, in faded pencil, Camp 3, Islamorada, July 1935, 3 months before the storm. The veterans had left me their evidence, their proof they'd existed. I kept my promise. Over the next month, I researched every one of those 400 men, found their names, their service records, their families. I compiled it all into a report that I sent to historians, journalists, the VA, anyone who would listen. The Keys erected a memorial at mile marker 47, 400 names carved in stone. The monument reads, "To the veterans of the Great War, who died in the Labor Day hurricane of September 2nd, 1935. Forgotten by the government they served. Remembered by the storm that became their witness. Hurricane Elena never returned. Weather patterns in the Keys normalized. The impossible storm that had defied physics for 10 days was gone from both the world and the record books. But sometimes, on September 2nd, the anniversary of the 1935 storm, people report strange weather at mile marker 47. Brief moments of wind and rain that come from nowhere. Some say it's just weather. Others say it's the veterans, reminding us they're still there, still watching, still waiting to make sure we don't forget. I know the truth. They're at peace now. Finally. But they left a piece of their storm behind as a warning. The Keys remember what happened in 1935. The storm that stayed taught us that. Some suffering is so profound it changes reality itself. Some deaths echo so loudly they can hold a hurricane in place for 88 years. And some stories demand to be told, even if they have to tear apart the laws of physics to be heard. The hurricane that stayed is gone, but its message remains. Remember the forgotten. Witness the unseen. Acknowledge the betrayed. Or one day, they'll find a way to make you listen. I thought that was the end of it. The storm dissipated, the veterans found peace, and life in the Keys returned to normal. I kept my promise, got the memorial built, made sure those 400 names were carved in stone where tourists and locals would see them every day. The story made national news for about a week before something else pushed it out of the headlines. That's how these things go. But 3 weeks after Hurricane Elena finally disappeared, I started having the dreams. I'd be standing in the eye of a hurricane, but not Elena's eye. Different storms, different eras. I saw the great Miami hurricane of 1926, watched as it tore apart the newly built city, killing 400 people who'd moved to Florida thinking they'd found paradise. I saw Hurricane Andrew in 1992, Category 5 winds shredding Homestead to splinters. I saw Katrina passing over Florida before heading to New Orleans, and I saw storms that never had names, hurricanes from centuries ago that killed Calusa Indians, Spanish sailors, pioneer settlers. In every dream I could see them, the dead, the trapped, the ones who never left the storms that killed them. I woke up each morning exhausted, my sheets soaked with sweat that smelled like salt water. My wife, Carmen, noticed first. "Marcus, you're talking in your sleep, yelling about wind and water. Are you having PTSD from the Elena situation?" "Maybe," I said, but I knew it was more than that. Something had changed when I entered that storm. When I'd promised to remember the forgotten, I'd opened myself to something. A connection, an ability to see what others couldn't. The photograph the veterans had left me sat on my nightstand. Sometimes, when I looked at it in the dark, I swear I could see the men moving, turning their heads to look at me, reminding me that my promise extended beyond just them. On November 3rd, exactly 3 weeks after Elena disappeared, I got a call from Dr. Sarah Chen. "Sheriff Reeves, I need you to come to Miami. There's something you need to see." "Doctor, I'm done with storm phenomena. I kept my promise to those veterans. That chapter's closed. It's not about Elena. It's about Hurricane Andrew. Sheriff, we're detecting the same anomalous readings at the Homestead Air Force Base ruins. The same pattern we saw before Elena revealed herself. Something's building there. Another permanent storm, and this one's worse. I drove to Miami that afternoon, the 3-hour trip giving me too much time to think. Hurricane Andrew had devastated South Florida in 1992, hitting as a Category 5 with sustained winds of 165 miles per hour. It was the most expensive hurricane in U.S. history at the time, causing $27 billion in damage and leaving 250,000 people homeless. But the official death toll was only 65 people. That number had always bothered me. How does a Category 5 hurricane that destroyed entire neighborhoods only kill 65 people? The answer was that it didn't. The real number was much higher, but many deaths went unreported. Undocumented immigrants, homeless people, criminals who were off the grid. They died in Andrew, but they were never counted. Dr. Chen met me at what used to be Homestead Air Force Base. The base had been partially destroyed by Andrew and never fully rebuilt. Large sections remained abandoned, slowly being reclaimed by Florida's aggressive vegetation. The readings started 2 days ago, Dr. Chen explained, as we walked through rusted chain-link fences. Local temperature anomalies, barometric pressure fluctuations, and reports of wind where there shouldn't be any. And people? Are there deaths? Not yet. But there have been incidents. 3 people have gone missing in the last 48 hours, all near the old base housing area. And witnesses report seeing a storm forming, but only at night, only in a specific location. We reached the abandoned housing section. Rows of destroyed homes, their roofs torn off by Andrew 31 years ago, never repaired. Nature had moved in, vines growing through windows, trees sprouting from living rooms. It should have been peaceful, reclaimed by the earth. Instead, it felt hostile, wrong. The air pressure was off, making my ears pop. The temperature kept fluctuating, hot, then cold, then hot again within seconds. And there was wind, but it came from no consistent direction. It swirled, eddied, spiraled like water going down a drain. "Do you feel it?" Dr. Chen asked. "Yeah, it's different from Elena. That storm wanted to be seen, wanted attention. This one feels angry." As the sun set, the phenomenon became visible. Clouds formed directly overhead, spinning faster than natural. Rain began to fall, but only over the destroyed housing area. A perfect circle of storm, maybe half a mile across. And in the rain, I saw them again. Faces. But these weren't soldiers. These were families. Children. People who'd died in their homes when Andrew tore through at 3 a.m., giving them no chance to escape. How many people really died in Andrew? I asked Dr. Chen. Officially? 65. Unofficially? Some estimates go as high as 200. Many were never reported because they weren't supposed to be here. And many deaths weren't directly from the storm. People died in the chaos afterward, from lack of medical care, from drinking contaminated water, from infections in unsanitary conditions. So this storm is held by people who weren't just killed by Andrew. They were killed by what came after. The neglect, the abandonment, the government failure to help. That's my theory. Elena was held by betrayed veterans. This one's held by forgotten victims of bureaucratic failure. People who should have been helped and weren't. As darkness fell, the storm intensified. Lightning began to strike, but it moved wrong, crawling across the ground like electric snakes before leaping into the sky. Thunder came before the lightning, violating causality. And the voices, God, the voices were worse than Elena's. Nobody came. We waited for help. They said FEMA was coming. We died drinking dirty water. My children starved while trucks of supplies sat in warehouses. These weren't soldiers who'd made peace with their deaths. These were civilians who'd been promised help that never arrived, who'd died slowly in the aftermath while politicians argued about jurisdiction and funding. Dr. Chen set up instruments at the storm's edge. "Sheriff, if this follows the same pattern as Elena, it's going to expand. In a week, this could cover all of Homestead. In a month, maybe Miami. These trapped soul storms seem to grow when they're ignored. Then we do what we did before. We go in, we listen, we acknowledge them. You sure about that?" These dead are angry, Sheriff. The veterans in Elena were hurt, betrayed, but they were soldiers. They understood sacrifice. These are families who died because someone in an office somewhere decided that helping them wasn't a priority. That's a different kind of anger. She was right. But I'd made a promise to the veterans, to witness the unseen, to remember the forgotten. That promise didn't end with them. I waited until midnight, then entered the storm alone. The transition was more violent than Elena. The wind didn't just push, it clawed, grabbed, tried to tear me apart. The rain wasn't just water. It was caustic, stinging my skin. And the temperature swung from freezing to scalding within seconds. I pushed forward, using a compass that spun uselessly and a flashlight that barely penetrated the darkness. The storm wasn't just weather here. It was malevolent, actively trying to drive me out. I passed through destroyed homes, seeing imprints of their final moments. A family huddled in a bathroom as the roof tore away. A man trying to hold a door shut against 165 miles per hour winds. A child reaching for her mother as both were swept away by the storm surge. But I also saw what came after. The days of waiting for help that didn't come. The FEMA trailers that took months to arrive. The insurance companies that denied claims. The supplies that sat in warehouses while people died of dehydration. The bureaucratic nightmare that killed more people than the storm itself. Finally, I reached the eye. It was smaller than Elena's, more claustrophobic, and the dead didn't stand in orderly ranks like the veterans. They moved frantically, chaotically, still searching for help that would never come. A woman approached me. She looked about 40, holding the hand of a girl maybe 7 years old. Both were translucent, made of rain and wind and unfinished business. "You're alive," the woman said. "How did you get through the storm?" I walked. I came to listen. Listen? We've been screaming for 31 years. Nobody listens. Nobody came then, nobody comes now. We died waiting for help, and we're still waiting. What's your name? Maria Espinoza. This is my daughter, Sophia. We died on August 27th, 1992. 3 days after the hurricane. We weren't killed by wind or water. We died because we couldn't find clean water to drink. We died because the National Guard didn't reach our neighborhood for a week. We died because we didn't matter enough to save. You mattered. You matter now. That's why I'm here. Maria laughed bitterly. Words. That's all you have? The veterans got their memorial. What do we get? We weren't heroes, we were just poor people in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nobody builds memorials for people like us. She was right, and that truth cut deep. The veterans had been easy to memorialize, heroes betrayed by their government. But these victims? They were complicated. Some were undocumented, some were criminals, some were just poor. America doesn't build monuments to people like that. You're right, I said. There won't be a memorial. The government won't acknowledge their failure. But I can bear witness, I can tell your story. And then what? You write a report and we're supposed to just let go, move on? We waited 31 years to be noticed. Now that someone finally sees us, you think we'll just disappear? I don't know what you'll do. But I know that holding this storm, trapping yourselves in this moment, it's not justice, it's just more suffering. A man stepped forward from the crowd. He was young, maybe 25, with tattoos covering his arms. I was a gang member when Andrew hit. Shot someone 2 weeks before the hurricane. I was hiding, trying to get out of Florida when the storm came. It killed me while I was hiding in an abandoned building. I died alone, and nobody ever reported me missing because nobody wanted me found. Does someone like me deserve peace? I don't know about deserve, I said honestly. But I know that holding on to this anger, this pain, it's not punishing anyone but yourselves. The bureaucrats who failed you are retired, living comfortably. The politicians who underfunded the relief efforts got re-elected. Your suffering isn't reaching them. It's just eating you. Maria looked at her daughter. Sophia died because I couldn't protect her. I tried everything, begged for water, for medicine. She got dysentery from drinking contaminated water. She was 7 years old, and she died because the richest country in the world couldn't deliver clean water to its own citizens. I have a daughter, I said quietly, 8 years old, and if something happened to her because people didn't help, because they could have saved her and didn't, I'd never forgive them. I'd hold on to that rage forever if I could. But Maria, is this what Sophia needs? To be trapped in the moment of her death forever? Doesn't she deserve to move on, to find whatever peace exists after this? Maria looked at Sophia, and I saw the moment something broke. The anger, the need for recognition, warred with a mother's love, and love won. I just wanted someone to acknowledge what happened to us, Maria whispered, to say out loud that we mattered, that our deaths meant something. Your deaths meant everything, I said. They exposed the failures in our disaster response. After Andrew, FEMA was reformed, building codes were strengthened, emergency response was completely overhauled. Every person who's been properly helped by FEMA in the last 30 years owes that help to the people who died in Andrew's aftermath. Your suffering changed the system. It mattered. It wasn't entirely true. FEMA still failed during Katrina, still struggles now. But it was true enough. Andrew had been a wake-up call. These deaths had forced changes. The crowd of dead began to murmur. Some accepted this, others didn't. The storm around us fluctuated, weakening, then strengthening as the collective consciousness debated. Then Sophia spoke for the first time, her voice small and scared. "Mama, I'm tired. Can we stop being in the storm now?" And just like that, it was over. Not all at once like Elena, but gradually. The dead began to fade, one by one, finally accepting that they could let go. Maria and Sophia were among the last to go. "Tell people," Maria said as she started to dissolve. "Tell them what happened to us." "Not the hurricane. Everyone knows about the hurricane. Tell them about the after, the part everyone forgets, the part that killed us." I promise. They faded, and the storm began to collapse. But unlike Elena, this one didn't disappear cleanly. Something remained, a residue, a stain on reality that I could feel pressing against my consciousness. I stumbled out of the storm as it broke apart. Dr. Chen was waiting, her instruments going haywire as the phenomenon dissipated. "You did it again," she said in amazement. "Sheriff, how? How are you able to communicate with them?" "I don't know. Maybe because I made a promise to the first ones. Maybe because I'm willing to listen. Or maybe I looked at my hands. In the fading storm light, I could see them flickering, as if I wasn't entirely solid. Maybe I'm becoming something between the living and the dead. A bridge." Over the next week, I researched the Andrew aftermath. Found the untold stories, the uncounted dead. I compiled names where I could find them. Wrote about the system failures that had killed people who survived the hurricane itself. I sent it to journalists, to historians, to politicians. Some published it, most ignored it. Maria had been right. America doesn't memorialize its uncomfortable truths. But something had changed in me. I could feel storms now, not just the weather, but the pain trapped in them. And across Florida, I felt them stirring. Dozens of them. Centuries of hurricanes that had killed people who were then forgotten, ignored, swept aside by history. The Great Hurricane of 1780 that killed 22,000 across the Caribbean. The Okeechobee Hurricane of 1928 that drowned 2,500 migrant workers in Florida. Hurricane Camille in 1969. Hurricane Hugo in 1989, Charlie, Francis, Ivan, Jean in 2004. Every major storm had left behind trapped souls, people who died and were never properly acknowledged. And they were all waking up, all reaching out, all wanting what the veterans and Andrew's victims had received: recognition, witness, release. I was becoming their conduit, the sheriff who could see the dead in the storms. And there were so many storms yet to face. Dr. Chen called me again 2 weeks after the Andrew storm dissipated. "Sheriff, we have a problem." "A big one, you know, Lake Okeechobee?" "Of course. Second largest freshwater lake entirely within the United States. In 1928, a hurricane hit it. The storm's surge sent a wall of water over the surrounding dike, drowning entire towns. Most of the victims were migrant workers, many of them black laborers who weren't even identified. They were buried in mass graves, unmarked and forgotten. Let me guess, you're detecting anomalies at the lake." "Not at the lake, Sheriff. In it, the entire lake is showing signs of becoming a storm, an inland hurricane which shouldn't be physically possible. But if what we've learned is true, if enough traumatic deaths can hold a storm in place, then Lake Okeechobee has the potential to become the largest permanent storm phenomenon we've ever seen. 2,000 trapped souls, Sheriff. 2,000 people who drowned and were thrown into mass graves without even the dignity of having their names recorded." I closed my eyes, feeling the pull. They were calling to me, all of them. The forgotten dead of a century of Florida hurricanes. And I knew that this wasn't going to end with just a few storms. This was bigger than I'd imagined. Florida's entire history of hurricanes was rising, and I was the only one who could hear them. "I'll be there tomorrow," I told Dr. Chen. "But doctor, you need to understand something. I can't keep doing this alone. These storms are getting bigger, more complex. If Okeechobee awakens, if 2,000 souls manifest at once, I don't know if I can reach them all." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we might need help. And not the scientific kind. We need people who understand death, grief, collective trauma. We need historians, therapists, priests, shamans. Anyone who can help these trapped souls process what happened to them and move on. The government will never authorize that kind of response. Then the government can watch as Florida tears itself apart with permanent hurricanes at every site where marginalized people died and were forgotten. Because that's what's coming, doctor. Every storm that killed people who didn't matter enough to count, they're all waking up, and they're not going to stop until someone acknowledges them." That night, I had the worst dream yet. I saw a map of Florida covered in hurricanes, not moving, not dissipating, just sitting in place over sites of historical trauma. The Keys, Homestead, Lake Okeechobee, Tampa, Jacksonville. Every city that had suffered major hurricane death tolls was developing its own permanent storm, and at the center of each storm I saw them, the forgotten dead, thousands upon thousands of people whose deaths had been convenient to ignore, whose suffering had been deemed acceptable losses, whose names had been lost to time. They were all calling to me, all wanting what I'd given the veterans and Andrew's victims: recognition, witness, release. I woke up to my phone ringing. It was 3 a.m. The call was from the National Weather Service. "Sheriff Reeves, this is Director Patterson. We have a situation. 7 locations across Florida are simultaneously developing unexplained weather phenomena. All of them are sites of historical hurricane casualties." "Sir, it's happening all at once. They're all waking up." I looked at the photograph on my nightstand. The 400 veterans stared back at me, and I swear I could hear Corporal Mitchell's voice. "You promised to witness the unseen, Sheriff." Well, you're about to have a lot more witnesses to bear. I got dressed and headed out into the Florida night toward Lake Okeechobee and the 2,000 souls drowning there for 95 years. Behind me, I could feel the other storms stirring. Hurricane season was over, according to the calendar. But for the dead, hurricane season never ends, and I'd made a promise to remember them all. Lake Okeechobee at night is one of the most isolated places in Florida. The second largest freshwater lake in the United States, 730 square miles of dark water surrounded by sugarcane fields and small farming towns. No major cities nearby, no tourist attractions, just water, agriculture, and history most people would rather forget. I arrived at the Herbert Hoover Dike at 4:30 a.m., the massive earthen barrier that now surrounds the lake. It was built after the 1928 hurricane to prevent another disaster. Too late for the 2,500 people who drowned when the old dike failed and a 20-foot wall of water swept over the surrounding communities. Dr. Chen was already there with a team of meteorologists, all looking exhausted and scared. They'd set up instruments along the dike, and every single readout was showing impossible data. "It started 3 hours ago," Dr. Chen said as I approached. "The water temperature is fluctuating by 40 degrees. The surface is showing wave patterns consistent with hurricane-force winds, but there's no wind. And Sheriff," she pointed to the lake, "look at the water." I looked. The lake was glowing, not reflecting moonlight or city lights, but glowing from within, a pale green luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. And the water wasn't still. It was rotating slowly, the entire lake spinning like a massive bathtub drain. How fast is it rotating? Currently? About 1 revolution per hour. But it's accelerating. At this rate, by noon, it'll be rotating fast enough to create a vortex. The entire lake will become a whirlpool. And if that happens, every town on the shore gets flooded. I could feel them even from here. The dead. Not just a few dozen like the veterans, not a couple hundred like Andrew's victims. Thousands of them, all drowning simultaneously, over and over for 95 years. The psychic weight of it was crushing. I need to get out on the water. To the center. "Sheriff, that's suicide. If the lake continues to accelerate, if I don't do something, this becomes a permanent disaster. How many people live around the lake?" "About 40,000 in the immediate area, maybe 200,000 if the flooding spreads." I turned to her team. "Anyone here know boats?" I need to get to the center of the lake. A young meteorologist raised his hand nervously. "I grew up fishing here. I can get us out there. But, Sheriff, if this goes wrong, it won't." "It can't. Too many lives are at stake." We took a small motorboat from a nearby marina, one of the few that hadn't evacuated yet. The boat owner, an old man named Ray, insisted on coming with us. "My grandfather died in the '28 flood," he said. "If you're going to talk to the dead, I want to be there." He deserves to know someone remembers him. As we motored out onto the glowing lake, the rotation became more apparent. The water was pulling us clockwise, and we had to constantly adjust course to reach the center. The air grew colder with each mile, and I could see my breath despite it being August in Florida. The voices started about halfway to the center, whispers at first, then clearer. The water came so fast. I couldn't find my children. The dike broke at midnight. Nobody warned us. They buried us without names. The young meteorologist, whose name was David, started crying. "I can hear them. How can I hear them?" "Because you're listening," I said. Most people never listen. We reached the center of the lake just as the sun began to rise. The water here was calmer, the eye of the storm. But what floated on the surface made David turn away and vomit over the side. Bodies. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, floating face down. But they weren't solid. They were made of water, translucent impressions of the drowned. Men, women, children, all frozen in the moment of their deaths. And standing in the center, somehow standing on the water itself, was a woman. She looked about 30, wearing a soaked 1920s dress, her hair plastered to her face. Her eyes were the same pale green as the glowing lake. "You came," she said, and her voice echoed across the water. "The storm speaker. The one who freed the veterans and the Andrew dead. They told us you'd come. Who are you?" "I'm everyone who died here. We've merged, Sheriff. 2,500 souls become one consciousness. We've been drowning together so long we can't tell where one of us ends and another begins. You can call me Sarah. That was my name before the water took me. Sarah Johnson. I was 28 years old. I had 3 children. They all drowned with me. Sarah, I'm here to help. To listen. To witness what happened. We know, the others told us. But Sheriff, we're different from them. The veterans were betrayed, but they died quickly. The Andrew victims died in the aftermath, but they had each other, had community. We had nothing. We were migrants, laborers, black workers who weren't even considered fully human by the society that brought us here to work their fields. When the dike broke, when the water came, nobody came to save us. And when we died, they threw our bodies into mass graves. No names, no markers, no acknowledgement. Just approximately 2,500 dead, mostly Negroes. That's what the newspapers said. Mostly Negroes. Like we were livestock. Ray, the old man whose grandfather had died here, spoke up. My grandfather was Benjamin Ray. He worked the fields. He was 35 when he died. He had a family. Sarah turned to him, and her expression softened. Benjamin, yes, he's here, part of us. He wants you to know he made it to high ground with 12 others. They survived the water, but they died the next day from exposure and dehydration because nobody came to help. The rescue efforts focused on the white neighborhoods first. By the time they got to where your grandfather was, he'd been dead for hours. Ray's face crumpled. I always wondered. The family story was that he vanished in the flood, but nobody knew for sure. Now you know. And Sheriff, that's why we're here. Not because we drowned. Drowning was quick, almost merciful. We're here because of what came after. Because our bodies were buried without dignity. Because the death toll was deliberately underreported to protect the sugar company's reputation. Because Florida wanted to forget us as quickly as possible. We've been holding on to this lake for 95 years because if we let go, we truly disappear. At least this way we're still here, still real. I looked at the thousands of water corpses floating around us. Each one a person with a name, a story, a life. Reduced to mostly Negroes in a newspaper article. You're right, I said. What happened was horrific. The segregation, the neglect, the erasure. But Sarah, holding on to the lake, it's not justice. And it's going to hurt people. The towns around here, they're not the same people who failed you in 1928. They're just trying to live. And we were just trying to live when the water took us. Why should we care about them when nobody cared about us? Because you were the ones nobody cared about. You know what that feels like. Do you really want to become the ones inflicting that pain on others? The water around us began to churn more violently. The 2,500 souls that made up Sarah were debating, arguing, fighting within themselves. We're tired of being forgotten, Sarah said, and now her voice was layered with thousands of others speaking in unison. We're tired of being the footnote in Florida's history. We want what the veterans got, recognition, a memorial. our names carved in stone. Then let's make that happen. But not like this. Not by threatening people. Nobody listened before. The only reason you're here now is because we've become dangerous. We've learned that in death, the only way to be heard is to be threatening. She wasn't wrong. I'd only gotten involved because these storms were hurting people. Would I have sought out the forgotten dead otherwise? Would anyone? Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the radio. Sheriff, the rotation is accelerating. You need to get out of there now. The vortex is forming. The water beneath our boat began to swirl faster. In the distance, I could see the lake starting to form a funnel, water being pulled down into some impossible drain. The dead floating around us began to spiral inward, toward the center where Sarah stood. It's happening, Sarah said. The drowning is becoming permanent. Soon, the entire lake will exist in the moment of the flood. Anyone who enters will drown with us, over and over. It's the only way to make people remember. Stop this, I shouted over the rising wind. Sarah, please. This isn't the answer. Then what is? You tell me, Sheriff, how do 2,500 nameless dead get remembered? How do we matter when society worked so hard to make us not matter? David, the young meteorologist, suddenly spoke up. My dissertation, I wrote my master's thesis on the 1928 flood. I spent 2 years researching it, trying to find the real death toll, trying to recover the names. I found 847 of them, not all 2,500, but 847 names. People who existed, who had families, who mattered. I submitted it for publication. Every journal rejected it. They said it was too controversial, too focused on race, not scientifically relevant. Sarah turned to look at him. You tried to remember us. Yes, I failed, but I tried. And I have the names, the research, everything. If you'll let us, we can publish it, make it public. Put those 847 names out there at least. 847 out of 2,500. What about the rest? We'll never find all the names, I said. The records were deliberately destroyed or never kept in the first place. But we can acknowledge them. We can create a memorial that says, here lie 2,500 souls, many unknown, all remembered. We can make sure this history is taught, that people know what happened. The vortex was nearly complete now. Our boat was tilting, being pulled towards the center. Ray grabbed onto the sides, his knuckles white. You're asking us to trust you, Sarah said. To trust the same system that killed us and erased us. Why should we? Because I kept my promise to the veterans. I kept my promise to Andrew's victims. And I'll keep my promise to you. Your story will be told. Those 847 names will be carved in stone, and the unnamed will be honored, not as statistics, not as mostly Negroes, but as human beings who died and deserved better. The water beneath us stopped spinning. The vortex paused, held in place by Sarah's collective will. The 2,500 souls that made up her consciousness were deliberating, and I could feel the weight of their decision pressing down on reality itself. If we let go, Sarah finally said, we truly die. We've been here so long, this drowning is all we remember. We don't know what comes after. Maybe peace, maybe rest, maybe justice in whatever realm exists beyond this. But I know that this, I gestured to the vortex, the glowing water, the eternal drowning. This isn't living. You're all trapped in your worst moment. Don't you deserve better? Ray spoke again, tears streaming down his face. Grandfather Benjamin. If you're part of her, part of this, please, let go. You've suffered enough. We remember you. I named my son Benjamin after you. Your story lived on in our family even if the world forgot. Please, rest. Something. and Sarah's expression changed. The hardness, the anger began to crack. And through those cracks I could see them, the 2,500 individuals who'd merged into one vengeful entity. I could see mothers who'd lost children, fathers who'd tried to save families, children who'd never gotten to grow up, all trapped together in shared trauma for nearly a century. "Tell our story," Sarah whispered, and now she was crying, though her tears were lake water. All of it. Not just the drowning, but who we were. We were people. We had dreams. We mattered. Make them understand that we mattered. I promise. Sarah closed her eyes. Then we choose to believe you. We choose to let go. It's time to finish drowning. The 2,500 souls began to separate, pulling apart from their merged consciousness. Each water corpse floating around us gained definition, became an individual again, and one by one they sank beneath the surface, finally allowing themselves to complete the death they'd been holding at bay for 95 years. Sarah was the last to go. As she began to dissolve, she looked at Ray. "Tell your family Benjamin was brave. He saved those 12 people even though he couldn't save himself. He was a hero." Then she sank beneath the glowing water, and the lake went dark. The vortex collapsed. The rotation stopped. The temperature normalized. In the space of 30 seconds, Lake Okeechobee returned to being just a lake. We motored back to shore in silence. Dr. Chen met us at the dock, her instruments showing normal readings for the first time in hours. "It's over," she said in disbelief. "All the anomalies just stopped. How?" "They let go," I said. "Finally, after 95 years, they let go." Over the next 3 months, I kept my promise. David published his research, all 847 names. We pushed to get a memorial built on the shores of Lake Okeechobee. It wasn't easy. There was resistance, arguments about cost, debates about whether we should dwell on the past. But eventually, it happened. A wall of black granite near the lake, 847 names carved in alphabetical order. And below them, an inscription. "In memory of the 2,500 souls who perished in the Lake Okeechobee hurricane of September 16, 1928. Many of their names are lost to history, but all are remembered here. May they finally rest." The memorial was dedicated on September 16, 2024, the 96th anniversary of the flood. Ray was there, along with descendants of other victims. Dr. Chen came. David presented his research to a crowd of historians and journalists who finally understood its importance. I stood at the memorial as the sun set, and for the first time in months, I felt the pressure in my head ease. The dead of Lake Okeechobee were truly gone now, at peace. But I knew this wasn't the end. Across Florida, I could still feel them. The other storms, the other forgotten dead. Dr. Chen had confirmed it. 7 major sites were developing anomalies. The 1780 hurricane in the Caribbean. The 1926 Miami hurricane. The 1935 veterans were quiet now, but other storms from that era were stirring. The 1960s, the 1990s, the 2000s. Every generation had its hurricanes, and every hurricane had its forgotten dead. They were all waking up, all calling to me. The storm speaker, the sheriff who could hear them. My phone rang. It was Director Patterson from the National Weather Service. "Sheriff Reeves, we have a situation in Tampa. The 1848 hurricane. It's manifesting. The 1848 hurricane killed 50 people, didn't it? That's the official number. But our research suggests it may have killed several hundred, mostly Seminole Indians who weren't counted in the colonial records. Sheriff, they're forming a storm downtown Tampa. You need to get there now." I looked at the memorial, at the 847 names carved in stone. I'd promised to remember them all, every forgotten soul, every marginalized victim, every person history had deemed not worth counting. It was going to be a long hurricane season, and I was just getting started. I spent the next 6 months driving across Florida, from one awakening storm to another. Tampa's 1848 hurricane, where 200 Seminole dead held a storm over what was now a downtown financial district. The 1926 Miami hurricane, where 400 souls who'd died in the newly built city created a phenomenon in Coral Gables. The 1960 Hurricane Donna, still holding onto the Keys with 50 souls who'd refused evacuation and paid the price. Each time, the pattern was the same. I'd enter the storm, listen to the dead, acknowledge their suffering, promise to tell their story. And each time, they'd let go. Memorials were built, names were recovered, histories were rewritten to include the forgotten. But with each storm I released, I felt myself changing. The bridge between life and death that I'd become was taking its toll. I'd started to see people's deaths before they happened, glimpses of futures where storms would claim them. My body temperature fluctuated constantly. Sometimes my reflection in mirrors showed me as translucent, more water than flesh. Carmen noticed. My daughter, Elena, named before Hurricane Elena, a coincidence that now felt like prophecy, noticed. I was becoming less solid, less present, less alive. "You're dying," Dr. Chen told me after she ran tests following the Tampa storm. Or rather, you're transitioning. Your body is adapting to exist in both states simultaneously, alive and dead, present and absent. Sheriff, if you keep doing this, you're going to become like them, a permanent ghost, unable to fully exist in either world. How long do I have? At this rate? Maybe 6 months, maybe less. Each storm you enter accelerates the process, and if I stop, the transformation might reverse, or you might be too far gone already. I thought about that. Thought about Carmen and Elena, about the life I was losing, but I also thought about the storms still waiting. The dead still trapped. The promises I'd made. That night, I had a visitor. I woke to find Corporal Thomas Mitchell sitting in my bedroom, the veteran from the first storm. He looked solid, real, though I knew he wasn't. "Sheriff Reeves," he said, "we need to talk about what you're doing." "How are you here?" "You moved on." "We did. But we're still connected to you. You're the bridge, remember? We can reach across if we need to, and right now, you need to hear this. You have to stop. I made a promise that's killing you. Sheriff, we didn't ask you to sacrifice yourself. We asked you to witness, to remember. You've done that. You've freed dozens of storms, saved thousands of souls. But if you continue, you'll become like us, trapped between states, unable to fully exist anywhere. Is that really what you want? What I want doesn't matter. There are still storms out there, still people who need. There will always be more storms, Mitchell interrupted. There will always be more forgotten dead. You can't save them all, Sheriff. Nobody can. And if you die trying, then who witnesses the next generation's tragedies? Who speaks for the dead that haven't died yet? He was right. I knew he was right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that stopping now would be a betrayal of everyone I'd helped so far. "There's one more," I said. "One more storm I need to face. Then I'll stop." "Which one?" "Hurricane Andrew. The real Andrew. Not just the aftermath victims I already released." "The storm itself is still out there, Sheriff. Did you think releasing 200 souls would satisfy a Category 5? Andrew killed 65 people officially, maybe 200 unofficially. but the storm itself absorbed thousands. Everyone who felt its wrath, who lost everything, who were forever changed by it. That collective trauma is still swirling in the Atlantic, waiting to return. That's impossible. Hurricanes dissipate. They don't just wait. Normal hurricanes dissipate. But Andrew was different. It was the hurricane that changed how we thought about hurricanes. It exposed how unprepared we were, how our building codes were inadequate, how our evacuation plans were flawed. Andrew was a teacher, Sheriff. A brutal, merciless teacher. And the lesson isn't over. I sat up in bed. Where is it? Where it's been since 1992, circling in the Atlantic just beyond our ability to detect it, waiting for the right conditions to come back. And Sheriff, those conditions are here. Andrew is returning. And this time it won't just hit Miami. It's going to hit every place it should have hit in 1992 but missed. Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, the entire state. Unless someone stops it. How do I stop a hurricane? You don't stop it. You release it. You convince it that the lesson has been learned, that Florida has changed. But to do that, you'll have to go further into death than you've ever gone. You'll have to meet the storm at its source, in the space where weather becomes conscious, where natural disasters become supernatural entities. And Sheriff, if you go that deep, you might not come back. Mitchell faded, leaving me alone in the dark with a choice. Save myself and let Andrew return to devastate Florida again, or sacrifice whatever remained of my life to stop it. I already knew what I'd choose. I'd always known. 3 days later, I was on a boat 200 miles off the coast of Miami, in the exact coordinates where Andrew had formed in 1992. Dr. Chen had arranged it, though she'd begged me not to go. Sheriff, there's nothing out here. Satellites show clear skies, calm seas. If Andrew is out here, it's existing in a state we can't measure. That's why I have to go in person. The instruments can't see what's between life and death. But I can. The ocean was perfectly calm when we arrived. Blue skies, gentle swells, 85-degree water. Paradise conditions. But I could feel it. The presence lurking beneath the surface. Not in the water itself, but in the space between the water and the air, between the possible and the impossible. I dove overboard before Dr. Chen could stop me. The water was warm, welcoming. I swam down, following a pull I couldn't see but could feel in my dissolving bones. The light faded, the pressure increased. My lungs burned, but I didn't need air anymore. Not really. I was more ghost than human now. At a depth where I should have been crushed, I found it. The eye of Hurricane Andrew, existing in a pocket dimension beneath the ocean. Inside, the storm raged eternal, a perpetual Category 5, winds exceeding 165 miles per hour, pressure so low it should have torn itself apart. And in the center, I saw her. Not a person this time, but the storm itself given form. She was massive, 30 feet tall, made of wind and rain and lightning. Her eyes were the calm of the eye, her voice the howl of the wind. "Storm speaker," Andrew said, and her voice was the sound of 1,000,000 homes being destroyed. "You've come to ask me to die. I've come to ask if you've taught your lesson. If Florida has learned. Learned? Look at Miami. Look at the coast. They rebuilt right where I destroyed. Bigger buildings, yes. Stronger codes, yes. But the same hubris, the same assumption that they can defeat nature with engineering. They learned nothing. They learned to evacuate better. They learned to build safer. Andrew, 65 people died in you. If you came back today with the same intensity, how many would die?" "Fewer," she admitted. Perhaps only 20, perhaps only 10. The lesson had some effect. Then let it be enough. You've been circling out here for 32 years. Don't you want to dissipate? To become just wind and rain again without consciousness, without purpose? Don't you want to rest? Hurricanes don't rest, Sheriff. We're born from warm water and wind shear. We rage until the conditions no longer support us. Then we die. But I never died. The trauma I caused, the changes I forced, they kept me alive, conscious, aware. And now I'm strong enough to do it again, to teach another lesson. What lesson? That nature is stronger than humanity? We already know that. Every hurricane season reminds us. The lesson that Florida isn't meant for 20 million people, that building cities in hurricane zones is madness, that eventually nature will reclaim what was never yours to take. She was right. Florida had always been borrowed time, snatched from swamps and storms through engineering and arrogance. But millions of people lived here now. My family lived here. They deserved protection, even if their presence was ecological sin. If you come back, you'll kill people who weren't even born when you hit in 1992. Children who had no part in the decisions that led to overdevelopment. Is that justice? It's balance. It's the earth protecting itself. Sheriff, I'm not evil. I'm not even angry. I'm just inevitable. You can't negotiate with inevitability. But I can bear witness to it, I said. Andrew, you're right. Florida is overpopulated, overdeveloped, unsustainable. But the people living here now, they're just trying to survive. Punishing them won't change the system. It'll just create more trauma, more suffering, more storms like you who can't let go. Then what's your solution, Storm Speaker? How do we break the cycle? We remember. We teach. We prepare. We acknowledge that living in Florida means living with hurricanes, and we plan accordingly. We stop pretending we've conquered nature and start respecting it. Andrew, you taught that lesson in 1992. Let that be enough. Let yourself finally dissipate. The storm that was Andrew seemed to consider this. Her winds slowed slightly. Her eye widened. If I dissipate, I cease to exist. Everything I am, everything I represent, vanishes. Not vanishes, transforms, becomes part of the cycle again. Water and wind and energy, ready to create the next generation of storms, but without consciousness, without trauma. Just natural forces doing what they've done for millions of years. And you, Sheriff? You've transformed too. You're barely human anymore. If I dissipate, if I release the energy that's keeping this pocket dimension stable, you'll be trapped here, caught between the ocean and the sky, between life and death. Is that what you want? I thought of Carmen and Elena, of the life I was giving up, of all the future storms I wouldn't be there to witness and release. If that's the price of keeping Florida safe, then yes. That's what I choose. Andrew laughed, and it sounded like thunder. You're willing to die to stop me from killing. That's either very noble or very stupid. Probably both. Sheriff Marcus Reeves, you freed the veterans. You released the Andrew aftermath victims. You gave voice to Lake Okeechobee's drowned. You've spent yourself completely in service of the forgotten dead. Why? Because somebody had to listen. Somebody had to care about the people nobody else cared about. And now you'll become one of them. Forgotten, trapped, lost between states. Who will remember you? My family, the people I saved. And maybe someday another storm speaker will find me and help me move on. But that's okay. I made my choice. Andrew's winds slowed further. For the first time since 1992, the eternal Category 5 began to weaken. You've convinced me, Sheriff. Not with arguments about justice or lessons learned. You've convinced me by showing me what it means to let go. If you can sacrifice everything for strangers, then I can let go of my purpose. I can return to being just wind and rain. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This pocket dimension exists because of my consciousness. When I dissipate, it collapses. You'll be caught in the collapse, neither fully alive nor fully dead, trapped in the boundary between ocean and sky. But Sheriff, there's another option. What option? Become me. Take my consciousness into yourself. Become the storm. You'll gain the power to protect Florida from future hurricanes, to divert them, to weaken them before they make landfall. You'll save thousands of lives, but you'll lose everything human. You'll become a force of nature, no longer Marcus Reeves but the guardian hurricane of Florida. I thought about it. The power to prevent future disasters, to protect my family, my state, everyone, but at the cost of my humanity, my identity, my very self. If I become you, will I remember who I was? For a while, maybe decades, but eventually the human memories fade. You'll become just purpose, just protection. Another conscious storm, but a benevolent one. Is that so different from what you've been doing already? She was right. I'd already been sacrificing my humanity piece by piece. This would just be the final step. But before I could answer, I heard another voice. Not Mitchell, not any of the dead I'd released. This voice was alive, transmitted through the water itself. "Dad, don't you dare!" Elena, my 8-year-old daughter, somehow reaching me across the impossible distance between the living world and this pocket dimension. "Elena, how? Dr. Chen gave me the radio. She said you could hear me if I was in the water. Dad, come home, please. Don't become a storm. Don't leave us." My heart broke. I'd been so focused on saving everyone else that I'd forgotten the most important people to save, my own family. "Elena, sweetheart, if I come back, the hurricane will be just a hurricane, like all the others. We'll evacuate if we have to. We'll prepare, but Dad, we need you human. Not as a storm, not as a ghost. We need you here, with us, even if that means you can't save everyone. Please." Andrew looked at me. "Choose, Sheriff. Become the guardian storm and save thousands, or return to your family and live whatever brief human life remains to you. But choose now. The pocket dimension is collapsing. The winds around us were dissipating. Andrew was letting go, and the space between was falling apart. I had seconds to decide. I thought of every soul I'd released. The veterans, the Andrew victims, the Lake Okeechobee drowned. I'd given them peace by helping them let go. Maybe it was time to take my own advice. "I choose to go home," I said. "I choose my family. Andrew, thank you for the offer, but I'm done being the storm speaker. Let someone else carry that burden next time." Andrew smiled, and it was the first genuine expression I'd seen from her. "Good choice, Sheriff. Go home. Be human while you still can, and don't worry, I'll make sure you survive the collapse. Consider it a final thank you from all the storms you've released." The winds surged, catching me, lifting me. I felt myself being pushed upward, toward the surface, toward life. The pocket dimension collapsed behind me, Andrew's consciousness finally dissolving into mere atmospheric pressure and water vapor. I broke the surface gasping, fully human again. Dr. Chen hauled me into the boat, and Carmen and Elena were there, all of them crying and hugging me. "How did you... We weren't going to let you sacrifice yourself alone," Carmen said. "Dr. Chen told us what you were planning, so we came to bring you home." I held my daughter, feeling solid for the first time in months. The mark on my palm, where the first storm had touched me, was fading. My temperature was normalizing. The connection to the dead storms was growing distant. "Is it over?" Elena asked. "Yeah, sweetheart, it's over. The storms are at peace, and so am I." We sailed back to Miami as the sun set, and for the first time in months, when I looked at the horizon, I didn't see ghosts. Just water and sky and the promise of weather that was only weather. Hurricane Andrew never returned. The meteorologist declared it an unusual atmospheric anomaly. Nothing more. The permanent storms at other locations remained gone, their trapped souls finally at rest. I retired from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department 3 months later. My body recovered mostly, though I never lost the ability to sense when major storms were forming. I just chose not to act on it anymore. That was someone else's burden now. The memorials stood. The names were carved in stone. The forgotten dead were remembered. And Florida continued to build, to grow, to sprawl into every available space, because that's what humans do. We build in flood zones and fire zones and earthquake zones because we have to live somewhere. And everywhere is dangerous if you look close enough. I made my peace with that. With the fact that I couldn't save everyone. That my time as the storm speaker had been necessary but finite. That sometimes the most important people to save are the ones sitting at your dinner table. But late at night, when hurricane season peaks and I hear the wind howl, I think about them. The veterans holding a storm in place for 88 years. The Andrew victims dying slowly in bureaucratic neglect. The 2,500 souls drowning eternally in Lake Okeechobee. All of them finally at rest because someone listened. And sometimes, very rarely, I hear their voices on the wind, not calling for help anymore. Just saying thank you. The hurricane season of 2024 was the quietest on record. Meteorologists couldn't explain why, but I knew. The storms had finally learned to let go, and so had I.